Property prices could go down amid a projected supply increase. Court ruling in Thailand could delay next month's elections. And a fragile truce takes hold in Ukraine.
Good evening. Projections of an increase in housing supply have led to fears that prices could drop. And as Vicky Kung reports, there are now fresh concerns about how the government will meet its long-term target of 470,000 units.
Figures released by the Transport and Housing Bureau show the number of private residential units completed last year stood at 8,300. That's a 17% drop from just over 10,000 in 2012 and the lowest figure since 2009. Meanwhile, construction began for 14,100 private homes in 2013. That's down 24% from the record figure of 18,600 the year before. But there are signs of supply increasing throughout 2013. The number of private units completed rose from 200 in the first quarter to 3,900 in the final quarter. And the total number of unsold units over the next 3 to 4 years is tipped to reach 71,000. Bagel Lau of Midland Realty now expects as many as 18,000 units could be completed in 2014. And he believes overall property prices could fall by 5 to 10% this year. Lau said prices could go down even more when supply increases further and interest rates start to climb. The Housing Authority will play a key role in trying to meet the long-term government target of 470,000 homes in 10 years. Among that total, there will be 200,000 public housing units and 80,000 home ownership scheme flats. So far, the government has secured or identified land for 179,000 of those units.
The task for us now is to identify the additional land above the 179,000 to allow us to achieve the total that is now set by the government. That's roughly 280,000. And quite frankly, it will be a challenge.
And Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Chung acknowledged money for the Housing Authority in building all those new homes remains an issue. The Housing Authority said it will hire more people in future to cope with the increasing workload, but it expressed fears that projects may still be delayed because there's a lack of manpower in the construction industry. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
The West Kowloon Cultural District Authority wants to increase the development's density by 15%. The authority insisted that would not have a negative impact on the surrounding environment.
The proposal is to raise the cultural hub's plot ratio from the current 1.81 to 2.08, which increases the gross floor area by about 110,000 square meters. The extra area will be used to build hotels and hostels for visiting artists, as well as rehearsal space, dining areas and offices.
That would mean, effectively, that the existing breakup of cultural facilities, OACF, RDE, and then residential and office space would remain the same under the pro rata allocation.
Lawmakers questioned if the authority was trying to raise more money because the development is over budget. But the government pointed out that revenue from the project will go into public coffers.
Our major objective is to provide more facilities for the arts and cultural sectors. And also some new GFAs can be given to the government for sale so that more land can be provided to Hong Kong people. So it is not to increase the revenue of the WKCDA.
But legislators were not happy with what they called a lack of details.
You cannot tell us where new facilities will be added. So how can we express our views? Or for the original building heights, 50, 70, 100 meters, that will absolutely be no change.
Lynch insisted an increase in the plot ratio would not have a negative impact on the surrounding environment.
At the moment, we see only the very most minor increases in terms of building heights on a number of the allocated buildings, and the basic parameters underpinning the master plan and the development plan still stand. And on that basis, we believe that there are only positives.
He said more details can become available when assessments relating to the proposed increase are completed in March.
Hong Kong police today continued to gather evidence in Indonesia in the case of the domestic helper who was allegedly abused while she worked here. Rubiana is still in hospital and her situation continues to improve. A Hong Kong forensic expert and a police photographer who arrived in Indonesia yesterday were at the hospital today to collect evidence. And representatives of the local employment agency, which arranged for Rubiana to come and work in Hong Kong, met with Hong Kong police officers at a local police station. The officers expect to finish their work today and could return to Hong Kong tomorrow at the earliest.
Thailand's constitutional court ruled unanimously today that the country's election commission has the authority to postpone a snap election set for February the 2nd. There's no immediate word on whether the vote would indeed be delayed. Meanwhile, opposition protesters marched on government buildings again today, demanding that employees inside go on strike. They're trying to paralyze government business in Bangkok in an effort to force the administration of caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to step down. The Democrat Party that's leading the protests is vowing to boycott the election no matter if and when it's held. They're demanding total electoral reform. The Constitutional Court said the potential for violence and the absence of registered candidates in some areas meant the vote should be delayed. Anti-government protesters in Ukraine expanded their barricades in the capital Kiev after a meeting between protest leaders and President Viktor Yanukovych bore few results. Opposition leaders urged the crowd to maintain a truce with police while their negotiations continue. Alan Booknear reports.
Emerging after hours of talks with the president, opposition leaders said Yanukovych had agreed to ensure the release of dozens of detained protesters, but little else. Boxer-turned-politician Vitaly Klitschko said talking to a man who's already decided to lie is pointless. The crowd booed when opposition leader Ole Tianabok asked who was in favor of continuing negotiations, and cheered when asked who wants them to quit the talks. It's unclear if there will be another round of negotiations. The demonstrations began in November when Yanukovych pulled out of signing a free trade deal with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. Tensions grew early Wednesday when at least 3 protesters were killed during the demonstrations in Kiev, 2 from gunshot wounds. The unrest is growing across the country as well. In Cherkasy in western Ukraine, protesters stormed a provincial government building. There were similar scenes across western Ukraine where Yanukovych has little support. Meanwhile, in Washington, the U.S. continued to maintain international pressure on the Ukrainian government to repeal a law it passed last week banning protests.
It has moved to weaken the foundations of Ukraine's democracy by criminalizing peaceful protest and stripping civil society and political opponents of key democratic protections under the law. We urge the government of Ukraine to take steps that represent a better way forward.
The U.S. State Department said it wasn't ruling out sanctions.
We're not eager to do so, but we need to calibrate our policy based on the situation on the ground.
Harf also called for the negotiations between Yanukovych and the opposition leaders to continue. Alan Booknear, TVB News.
3 bomb attacks hit Cairo today, killing at least 5 people and wounding about 50 others. The violence began when a suicide bomber rammed a car into cement blocks surrounding Egypt's main police headquarters. The blast also tore through nearby buildings and destroyed priceless artifacts in the Museum of Islamic Art. 2 hours later, another bomb struck a police car on patrol near a metro station and the Russian Culture Center. That attack killed 1 person and wounded 8 others. A third, smaller blast targeted another police station but caused no casualties. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks.
The United States has expressed concern about territorial disputes between China and its neighbors. The head of the U.S. Pacific Command, Admiral Samuel Locklear, called for dialogue to ease tension.
Ultimately, China needs to be a regional leader. Their military needs to be a regional leader. It needs to coexist in that part of the world with our allies and with our militaries, and we need to work together for the mutual security. But I think they're going to have to work hard to get through some of the issues, the territorial disputes they're having with their neighbors. And, you know, we don't take sides on the territorial disputes, but we do expect them to be done peacefully.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today called for dialogue between Tokyo and its neighbors to try to improve ties. In a speech during the opening session of the lower house of Parliament, Abe called relations between China and Japan inseparable.
When we come back, Justin Bieber getting into trouble in Miami. Locally, plans to build a private university in Sai Kung. And gearing up for the Lunar New Year.